Let's now continue with the next part of A Journey to the West. The second stop on the topic of the sacred Mantrayana method of recognizing the nature of mind. While recognizing the nature of mind, this particular speech was given on June 25th, invited by Dzigar Khenpo Rinpoche to Longhawk Farm. While Dzigar Khenpo Rinpoche is still teaching Dharma nowadays, he is one of the reincarnation of Khenpo Yinten Gyatso. He came to United States back in 1989. I think he has quite a few of centers now. Back then, this particular speech was given at Longhawk Farm. It was a rented center back then. Some of those places were centers, but nowadays they were not anymore, including Marpa House from yesterday. It is said that now the center is no longer there, maybe because the lack of sustainability of that center, as well as the Lama has already passed away. So that particular place has already been sold to some other groups. So the Marpa House is no longer available as a Dharma center. The Longhawk Farm is considered as one of the large centers or a large place to host various kinds of events, such as symposium and weddings and so on. Some said that it is still available to rent if Dharma teachers were to give teachings over there. Because the house back then, 30 years ago, it has a very pointy roof. It looks rather quite rustic. And over there, Phuntsok Rinpoche gave a teaching on recognizing nature of mind. Now, Dzigar Khenpo Rinpoche has a few centers. Some of the centers named Jigme something and Phuntsok something, maybe because of the name similar to Phuntsok Rinpoche, or maybe something else, I'm not too sure. He studies both Kagyu and Nyingma, and over here Phuntsok Rinpoche give the pointing out instruction with a combination of Kagyu and Nyingma. This is rather quite interesting. This particular teaching was not recorded. We did not record anything, and Phuntsok Rinpoche did not prepare anything either. He didn't flip open any books, because he didn't even take many books with him, just a few of them. And back then, there was no opportunity to search on internet, to Google or anything. So let's look at this very interesting speech. Dzigar Khenpo Rinpoche gave the opening speech, Om Swasti, may all accomplishments be attained. Before getting started, I want to say a few words and also give a brief instruction for His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche. When an occasion like this occurs, it is traditional to speak of the 5 perfections, or the 5 magnificent factors of this grand event, which are the perfect place, time, teacher, retinue, and teaching. First, the perfect place is here in Boulder, Colorado. This magnificent place has been blessed by His Holiness the 16th Gyalwang Karmapa and Kyabje Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Well, I'm not too sure if Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche was there, so I didn't really put the name in the Chinese version because I wasn't so sure. Then Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, as well as many other great masters. Second is the perfect time. This is the first time that all of us have gathered together to have an extended seminar of Nyingma summer seminar in this country. This is the magnificent time for us. While this Nyingma summer retreat is considered as one of the most important teachings or retreat time for them to accumulate virtue and practice together. Third is the perfect teacher. We're honored to have such a magnificent teacher over here. His Holiness Phuntsok Rinpoche is well-known master, a fully accomplished upholder of Dzogchen lineage, and also a noble turtle. As we know, all great turtles are the true embodiments of Guru Padmasambhava. Now Khenpo Rinpoche has been traveling all the way from Tibet, and we are fortunate to have him present with us to teach the Dharma. Fourth is the perfect retinue. This is magnificent retinue composed of Venerable Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, Venerable Gyatso Rinpoche, as well as all of us. Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche also will appear at Atili. I think he's in Cuba or somewhere like that. And then Gyatso Rinpoche was the abbot of Jesse Chuling. Also, he was a Toku from Doma Monastery as well. So when we look at the teachings included in the third stop, we will see more of the appearance of him. And then the fifth is the perfect teaching. On this magnificent occasion, I have requested His Holiness to turn the wheel of Dharma by giving us a direct pointing out instruction on the Dzogchen Ati Yoga, the direct teaching on the nature of mind. This wonderful event marks the time of our generation and our lives. I'd like to conclude here, and I'd like to make mandala offering to Yijing Lorbu as all of us request him to turn the Dharma wheel. I think the event marks the time. The mark really, it took me a while to translate it into Chinese, because I think this is such an important word. It is some significant event that will leave an imprint to your life. For example, whenever you receive the four Nintik empowerments and the empowerments of the peaceful monastery and so on, you definitely can consider them as the landmark, an imprint, an important mark in your life. There are a few things in your life that definitely worth to be called as a landmark. For example, whenever you meet a certain Lama, receive certain teachings, and from the worldly point of view, getting married, having children, found a job, getting into university, and so on, those are also considered the different landmarks in life. I think this is such a wonderful speech given by him that indeed those people who attended the Dharma teachings given by Phuntsok Rinpoche can definitely consider that this was the imprint, landmark that is really important in their life. I didn't include all of the instructions given by the others, but I included this one because this was very well spoken. And then Phuntsok Rinpoche started by giving the following teachings and saying that it is auspicious that we joyfully gather together here today. I want to start with the origin and the history of Buddhism and talk about the instructions on the nature of mind in a brief way. Well, sometimes Phuntsok Rinpoche would speak of the merit and qualities of their particular centers in order to comply with the particular group of Sangha.
我们这个接下来呢就是法王寺当时是
Phuntsok Rinpoche is very prolific, and we can say that he's quite charismatic when he gives teachings like that. And then he gives the teachings, Buddha Dharma from India to Tibet. This is the subtitle. The main title is giving the direct pointing out on the recognition of nature of mind. So we'll finish this part today. From the perspective of ultimate truth, our root teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, who possessed all aspects of skillful means and cared for us with great compassion and loving kindness, had already achieved the fruition of primordial protector Buddha Samadabhadra. From the perspective of his manifestation, the Buddha aroused the supreme bodhicitta 3 countless aeons ago, purified all defilements, accumulated immeasurable merit, and eventually was able to achieve Buddhahood in Bodh Gaya, India, carried out the 12 enlightened deeds in this world more than 2,500 years ago. Among these 12 deeds, the most essential one is the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma for the sake of inspiring and guiding fortunate beings. Well, out of our life, maybe the most important is to study the Dharma or to give teachings of the Dharma. So, for example, at the beginning or the later part of your life, maybe within your life in 3 years or 5 years, you had the period of time to study the Dharma that is considered as the most important in your life. So that is the landmark of your life. The first turning of the Dharma wheel is on the Four Noble Truths. The old monk sitting right over here in front of me sometimes nods to me just to demonstrate that he's listening. Well, I should stop teasing him. So the first turning of the Dharma wheel is on the Four Noble Truths, which belongs to the common vehicles. The second turning on the Mahayana vehicle emphasized on the absence of characteristics, and the third turning fully distinguishes the essence beyond a trace of doubt. Well, all of the Buddhists should know these terms. These terms are essential. Without knowing it, you won't be able to understand too much of the teachings. All 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel were for ordinary beings. Aside from that, the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma on the teaching of sacred mantra that belonged to the Vajrayana path according to the faculties of the supreme sentient beings in the God's realm, Naga's realm, Yaksha's realms, the human realms, and many others. While all teachings on the common or lesser vehicles were possessed by the 7 patriarchs, including the Mahakashyapa and so forth, Ananda and so on, and they propagated the teaching, spread the teaching so that they are able to thrive in the world. The 7 patriarchs, such as Mahakashyapa, Ananda, Shanavashika, Upagupta, Ditika, Krishna, and Sudarshana. The common Mahayana was compiled by Manjushri and Maitreya, who compiled then the section on extensive conduct. The uncommon Vajrayana teachings of sacred mantra was compiled and carried forward generally by the Lord of the 3 families, and specifically by Vajrapani, the glorious Lord of Secrets, who had the main responsibility of transmitting the tantric teachings to the human realm. Meanwhile, numerous great masters such as 6 ornaments and 2 supreme ones ensured the Buddha Dharma would thrive in the holy land of India, like the sun shining on the earth forever. While Nagarjuna and so on, they're considered as the great ornaments, Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and so on. The Buddha himself had prophesied that my teaching will spread and increase from north to north. He had also foretold that 8 years after his parinirvana, one who would surpass him, Padmasambhava, would appear in this world and would travel north to the land of snows to propagate his teachings. Exactly as the Buddha's own prophecy declared, Guru Rinpoche went to Tibet. and used various ways to tame sentient beings. This mantra adept, origin Toki Dorje or Padmasambhava, is the single primary emanation of the three figures of Buddha Shakyamuni, Amitabha in Sukhavati, Lord Avalokiteshvara in Mount Potala, and unsurpassable Buddha Shakyamuni in Bodh Gaya. On page 455, Phuntsok Rinpoche also recited some of the quotations from the sutras and shastras. Some of them are about how Amitabha is no other than Padmasambhava, and there are no other in the three kayas, and so on. Over here, Phuntsok Rinpoche did not quote from those texts. You can refer to that page. It was on the topic of Padmasambhava, I believe. And I think you can read the part where I drove for Phuntsok Rinpoche. This person collected these recordings and various kinds of information, especially on the part of Padmasambhava. He provided this particular information because the teaching on Padmasambhava given by Phuntsok Rinpoche was an excellent teaching, but I couldn't find any information on that. There's no recording from both us or the center. I think if I were to write this book 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it would be better than now. It's been 30 years, so many things had already been lost in the river of history. Maybe you should read that passage first on I drove for Phuntsok Rinpoche. I believe it is on 455, page 455, and it's very much connected to Padmasambhava teaching. And then you would probably have a very different feeling, especially when it comes to how someone kept that recording for 30 years. I truly feel that this is a dharma. This is something that's been hidden for 30 years, been kept for 30 years. Now, he was an unsurpassable great being who carried out extensive Dharma activities within the three spheres, heaven, earth, and subterranean, subjugating all the evil demonic forces and so on, especially those who had broken their vows. Now, the kinds of demonic forces and spirits who broken their vows are very much talked about in Vajrayana, especially if they were to enter into the physical body of, especially if they were to enter the bodies of practitioners, then they would break the vows. It was Padmasambhava who first dispelled all obstacles and negative conditions to the spreading of the thriving of the Dharma in Tibet by taming all vicious spirits, demonic forces, and vow-breaking spirits. During the same period, the great Khenpo Bodhisattva Shantarakshita went to Tibet and propagated Vajrayana teachings. Later, the 108 great panditas, including Vimalamitra, Shantigarbha, were invited to Tibet, and 108 great Tibetan translators, including Vairocana, Kawa Paltsek, and Chogro Louis Gyaltsen, were sent to India. As a result, the corpus of Buddha Dharma that had remained in India was brought to Tibet and translated into Tibetan. The flourishing of Buddhism in Tibet was unparalleled, even compared to the Holy Land of India. Gyaltsen during the time of was living during the time of 8th or 9th century, and back then there were various kinds of temples and monasteries that had a great spreading of Dharma. Unfortunately, the monasteries were then later destroyed, one in the 12th century and then later in 13th century. So in India, back in the 12th century, there were the movements of destruction of monasteries. And by the end of 13th century, majority of the monasteries and the sacred lands of Buddhism were all lost. Until 500 to 600 years ago, some of the bhikshus from Sri Lanka as well as other efforts were made, and then those places were recovered. But for 500 to 600 years, there were no Buddhism in India, and it has completely transformed into the land of without Dharma teachings. And in India, many of the teachings were translated later into Tibetan language. The teachings are then translated into Chinese language and propagated in mainland China as well. And now in India, in fact, not many of those ancient texts were saved, other than some very few of the texts that's composed in Pali language. So we can see that history can be really cruel. When Phuntsok Rinpoche talking about that, he said that the propagation of Buddhism in Tibet was prosperous, even more so than the sacred land of India. A few centuries later, when Venerable Atisha Dipankara, the intentional manifestation of Buddha Amitabha came to Tibet, he said, previously I thought that I had mastered all the vast and profound Dharma flourishing in India and all the scriptures that had been shown to me in the sky by Dakinis dwelling in realms such as Uddiyana, Yakshas, and Gandharva's realms, and all oceanic Dharma teachings, particularly all tantric teachings, were within the scope of my knowledge. However, when I saw Sanskrit manuscripts of tantras preserved at Samye Monastery, I realized that what I mastered was even less than 1% of them. There is no end to the tantras of the sacred mantra tradition. At that time, he was completely in awe and feeling that the sacred mantra has no end. It was completely boundless. It appears that the teachings has been propagated in Tibet as it had not been before, even in India. Now, Phuntsok Rinpoche, what Phuntsok Rinpoche said was not just from his own feeling, rather according to the history as well. Even in now, when we think about it, the propagation of Dharma in Tibet is rather quite inconceivable. The many different monasteries and even in Dunhuang and so on, we were trying to look for some very ancient texts of Tibet. We have those copied versions. Some of them has 60 volumes that we have already discovered, and some of the names had never been heard of. So even in Tibet, in monasteries, in some old houses, there are piles of sutra volumes of sutras. And then he continued to say that once the great accomplished master Ujjimpa is one of the greatest Kagyu masters. One of the founders of the 8 lineages of attainment also spoke with deep feelings. In today's Tibet, just the titles of all tantras in Nyingma sacred mantras tradition traditions are longer than the content of the complete Kagyu and Nyingma. It is so inconceivable because those tantras included everything. There are over 300 volumes even talking about the titles and not just about the content. It is said that in Ati tradition there are 64 million tantras, and when it comes to Ati there are such a great number. So it is said then that back in the time it was the earlier translation school of Nyingma that flourished in Tibet. And then later the Dharma schools followed the later translations of Tibetan texts from India, including Sakya, Kagyu, and Kadampa, came into existence one after another. The Kadampa was further developed into two main schools. The old Kadampa was founded by Venerable Atisha, and the new Kadampa or Gelupa founded by the great Tsongkhapa.